We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph and Meseches Horayos. This is Horayos Daf 13a. The Mishnah said, Par Kohen Mashuach uPareid. If you have the power of the Kohen Gadol and the power of the community, the power of the Kohen Gadol comes first. And the Gemara says, Meno Hanimili, from where do we know that this is the case? The Tanu Rabbanon, because the rabbis taught. The Brisa brings the pasuk. This pasuk is by the Par Ha'eda. It says, V'saraf oso kasher saraf es hapor harishon. You burn it just like you burned the first par, and that's a reference to the power of the Kohen Gadol. Matam eloma harishon. Why does it say the first? Sheyehi rishon kodem lepar ha'eda b'chol ma'asav. It means to say that the power of the Kohen Gadol is first. It comes before the Par Ha'eda in terms of all of its actions. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Par Kohen Mashiach uPar Ha'eda omdim. If you have the Par Kohen Gadol and the power of the congregation that are standing, that are pending in front of us, Par Kohen Mashiach kodem lepar Ha'eda b'chol masav. The Par Kohen Mashiach, the power of the Kohen Gadol, comes first before the Par Ha'eda, before the bull of the congregation, in respect to all of its proceedings. Since the Kohen Gadol, he provides the atonement, and it's the congregation which is atoned, so dinu sheyaktim hamechaper limischaper. It makes sense to say that the one who provides the atonement comes before the one or the ones who are receiving the atonement. And likewise it says, V'chiper ba'ado v'yad beso u'v'yad kol kahal Yisrael. It says it will be a kapara for him and his household and all of Klal Yisrael. You see that a Klal Yisrael comes last in this regard. Par helam davar shel tzibur. If you have the par helam davar of the congregation, kodem lepar shel avodas kochavim, that comes before the par of avodah zara. My time, what's the reason? Hai chatos v'hai ola, because the par helam davar shel tzibur is a korban chatos, and the par of avodah zara is an ola, and a chatos always comes before an ola. V'tanya, as we learned in the following brisa, v'hikrev esa shel chatos rishona, it says you bring the chatos first. And the Brisa continues, Matam and Lomer, why does the Pasuk have to say that? Im lalamid shetehei chatos rishon, if it's simply to teach us that the chatos comes first. Harei kvar nemar, but it already says in the Pasuk, V'sasheni yasa ola kamishpat, that the second one is an ola. So ela ze bona av, rather, this is building a rule, shehu kol chatos kodmos laolos haboim imoim, that anytime you have a chatos together with an ola, the chatos should come first before the ola that comes with them. V'kaim alon, and we've established afilu chatos ha'of, that even a bird chatos kodemes la'olas behema comes before an ola of an animal. And the Brisa continues, Par avodas kochavim kodem l'soyer avodas kochavim. The par, the bull of avodah zara, comes before the soyer of avodah zara. Amai, why is that the case? Hai chatos v'hayola, isn't it exactly the opposite? This one is a chatos, meaning the soyer is a chatos, and the par is an ola, so really the soyer should come first. And the Gemara says, Amri b'ma'arava mishmei de Rava bar Mori. They said in the West, in the name of Rava bar Mori, chatos avodas kochavim chasera aleph. Lechatos ksiv. By avodah zara, the word chatos is missing an aleph. It says lechatos without an aleph, and so therefore that tells you that it's not treated the same as a regular chatos. In this case, the par actually comes first. Rava Amar Rava says kimishpat ksiv bei. It says kimishpat, which indicates that the way it's written, that's the way it should be brought in this particular case. In this particular case, the chatos does not come first. Sor avodas kochavim kodim l'sor nasi. The soyer, the he-goat of avodah zara, comes before the goat that's brought by the nasi. My time, what's the reason for that? Hai tzibur, because by avodas kochavim here we're talking about the avodah zara of the tzibur, of the community. V'hai yochid, and the nasi is an individual, and therefore the community comes before the individual. Seir nasi kodem l'seiras yochid. The soyer of the nasi comes before the soyer of a regular individual. My time, what's the reason for that? Hai melech v'hai hedyot, because this one is a king and the other one is a regular person. The king comes first. Seiras yochid kodemes l'kivsas yochid. Let's say you have a seiras yochid, a female goat brought by an individual as a korban, and then you have a female sheep that's brought by an individual. The female goat comes first. And the Gemara says, Vatanya, but then we learn in the Brisa the exact opposite. Kivsas yachid, kodemis l'siras yachid. It actually says the sheep of the individual comes before the goat of the individual. Amar Abaye says Tanoihi. It's actually a machlokas Tanoim. Mar savar seira adifa. One holds that the female goat is preferred, it comes first. Shekein nisrabsa eitzel avodas kochavim biyachid. It's by an individual who commits the aver of avodah zara, is specifically supposed to bring a seira and not a kivsa, so therefore that's considered to be something that makes seira preferred over kivsa. Umar Savar, and the other one holds kivsa adifa, that actually the Female sheep is preferred. That comes first. Shekei nisrabsa ba'alya, because in terms of offerings, it has additional offerings of the tail, and so therefore that comes before the seira. And omer kodem lekeves haboimo, when the omer is brought, there was a sheep that was brought with it. The omer comes before the keves, and similarly shtei halechem kodem lechavosim haboim imoim. The shtei halechem, they come before the sheep that are brought together with them. Zeh haklal, this is the rule. Davar haba begin liyom, something that comes for the day. The omer and the shtei halechem are coming because of the day, so that comes first. Kodem ledavar haba begin lechem. That comes before something that is coming and accompanying the lechem. In other words, the keves is accompanying the omer, and the kvasim are accompanying the shtei halechem, and so therefore the omer comes first, then the keves, the shtei halechem come first, and then the kvasim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, ha'ish kodem leisha lahachios, a man comes before a woman in terms of rescuing, ulahashev aveda, or in terms of returning a lost object, the man comes first. Va'isha kodemes leish, but a woman comes before a man lechsus, in terms of providing garments because her humiliation is greater, ulahotzimi beis hashvi, and also to take out from captivity. There's a concern that the woman will be raped, and so she's taken out first. And the Mishnah continues, Bizman sheshneim umdim bekilkala. However, let's say both of them stand to be raped, so then ha'ish kodem leisha, then the man comes before the woman. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Hayahu v'yaviv v'rabo b'shvi, if he himself and his father and his rebbe are all captured, so who kodem l'rabo? So the person himself, he comes before his rebbe, his own life comes first. V'rabo kodem l'yaviv, his rebbe comes before his father. Imo kodemes l'kulam, and his mother comes before all of them, again, as we said, with regards to captivity. Chacham kodem l'melech Yisrael, a chacham comes before a king of Israel. Why is that the case? Because chacham shemes, if a chacham dies, ein lanu kayotzebo, there's no one that can replace him. But melech Yisrael shemes, if a king of Israel dies, kol Yisrael ru'uyim l'malchus, all of Klal Yisrael are fit to be kings. And the Brisa continues, Melech kodem l'kohen gadol, a king comes before a kohen gadol, shenemar, as it says, Vayomer hamelech lehem kechu imochem avdei adonechem. You see that the king over here is referred to as the Lord. He's the head of the kohen gadol. Kohen gadol kodem l'navi, and the kohen gadol, he comes before a navi, he comes before a prophet, shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Umasach osho sham tzadok hakohen v'nasan hanavi, and tzadok is mentioned first. Hiktim tzadok l'nasan, tzadok the kohen is mentioned before nasan the navi. Therefore, you see the kohen gadol comes before the navi. V'yomer, and it also says Shmana Yehoshua hakohen hagadol atavar v'reyecha. It says, listen, Yehoshua the kohen gadol, you v'reyecha and your colleagues. Now Yochel had yotos hayu. One might think these reyecha are just regular people. Tam v'lomer ki anshe mofes hema. No, the pasuk says they're people. They're anshe mofes. What's mofes? V'ein mofes el navi. Mofes refers to the navi. Shenemar v'nasan eilecha oso mofes, that the navi is going to provide for you a sign or a wonder, and so therefore you see here that the kohen gadol comes before the navi. Mashuach b'shem hamishcha kodem lemeruba begadim. If you have a kohen gadol that's anointed with the oil, he comes before a kohen gadol that's just meruba begadim, that's just wearing the clothing, the garments of the kohen gadol. Meruba begadim lemashiach sha'avar machmas kiryo. A meruba begadim comes before a kohen who was anointed but is no longer serving as the kohen gadol because of a seminal emission. Mashiach sha'avar machmas kiryo kodem la'avar machmas mumo. If you have a kohen gadol that was anointed but he's not serving because of he's a balkari, because of a seminal emission, he comes before a kohen gadol who's not serving because of a blemish. Avar machmas mumo kodem l'mashuach melchama. If a kohen gadol is not serving because of a blemish, he comes before the kohen that's mashuach melchama, that's anointed for war. Mashuach melchama kodem l'sgan. The mashuach melchama comes before the deputy kohen gadol. Sgan kodem la'amarkol. The sgan, he comes before the amarkol. The amarkol was one of the people who served in the Beis HaMikdash. He had the final say on things in the Beis HaMikdash. My amarkol, the Gemara says, what is this word amarkol? Amar Rav Chisda says, Amar Kula, he says everything. Again, the idea is he was the overseer of the Beis HaMikdash. Amarkol kodem legizbor, the amarkol comes before the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash. Gizbor kodem lerosh mishmor, the gizbor comes before the head of the mishmor. In terms of the Kohanim, they were divided up into groups that were called mishmor, and then within each mishmor there was a beis av, there was a family that would serve on that particular day. Each mishmor would take specific weeks, and the beis av would take specific days. So the gizbor comes before the rosh mishmor, and rosh mishmor, the head of the mishmor, kodem l'rosh beis av, he comes before the head of the beis av. Rosh beis av kodem l'kohen hadyot, and the rosh beis av comes before a regular kohen. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Le'inyan Tumah, with regards to Tumah, Skanu Mashuach Melchama, let's say you have the deputy Kohen Gadol, and the Mashuach Melchama, the one anointed for war, Eza Mehem Kodem, which one comes first? Meaning, which one should become Tameh? Let's say you have a mace that has to be taken care of. Amar Marzutra Breder of Nachman, Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman, says, Tashma, come and hear the following proof, to Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Skanu Mashuach Melchama, if you have the deputy Kohen Gadol, and you have the Mashuach Melchama, Shayu Mahalchim B'derech, that they're walking on the road, Upaga bohem mace mitzvah, and they come across a mace mitzvah, a dead body that needs to be taken care of. Mutav sheyatami mashuach melchama v'al yatami skan. It's better that the mashuach melchama becomes tamei and not the deputy kohen gadol. Shem yera bo psul bekohen gadol, because should there be a disqualification in the kohen gadol, nichnas hasgan u'mashamish tachtav. It's the skan, the deputy kohen gadol, that takes over. So it's better that he not become tamei. And the Gemara asks, Vatanya, but didn't we just learn in the Brisa above, Mashuach Melchama Kodem L'Skan, that the Mashuach Melchama precedes the Skan, he takes precedence, and therefore why should he be the one that becomes Tameh first? And the Gemara says to that, Amar Ravina says, Kitanyo ahi lahachayoso. That Brisa is talking about rescuing the individual. By rescuing, the Mashuach Melchama comes first, but when it comes to becoming Tameh, it's the Mashuach Melchama who should become Tameh. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Kohen Kodem LaLevi, a Kohen has precedence over a Levi, Levi LeYisrael, a Levi has precedence over a Yisrael, Yisrael LeMamzer, Yisrael has precedence over a Mamzer, Umamzer LeNasin, a Mamzer has precedence over a Nasin. A Nasin is somebody from the Givonim, it comes from a story in Sefer Yehoshua. They were a people that joined the Jewish nation at that time in Sefer Yehoshua. Unasin Lager, and Nasin comes before a Ger, a convert, V'ger LaEved Meshuchar, and a Ger comes before a freed slave. Amosai, when is this true? Bizman shakulam shavim. If all things are equal, all things being equal, so then again, Kohen before Levi, etc. Avalam haya mamzer Talmud Chacham v'Kohen Gadol am Aretz. But let's say you have a mamzer who's a Talmud Chacham and a Kohen Gadol that's an am Aretz. So mamzer Talmud Chacham kodem leKohen Gadol am Aretz. The mamzer who's a Talmud Chacham takes precedence over the Kohen Gadol who's an am Aretz. And the Gemara says, Kohen Kodem LaLevi, a Kohen comes before a Levi, Shenemar, as it says, B'nei Amram, Aaron and Moshe, Vayavdil, Aaron lahaktisho, Kodesh Kadashim, that Aaron was separated, Kodesh Kadashim, therefore the Kohen is before the Levi. Levi Kodem LaYisrael, a Levi comes before Yisrael, Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, Ba'esahi Hivdil Hashem, as Shevet HaLevi, that Shevet Levi, they were separated. Yisrael Kodem LaMamzer, Yisrael comes before a Mamzer, Shezem Miyuchas v'zeh Eino Miyuchas, because this one is Miyuchas, meaning to say the Yisrael is Miyuchas, he has good lineage, the Mamzer does not have good lineage, he comes from a relationship that's Asur. Mamzer Kodem LaNasin, a Mamzer comes before a Niszeba Mitipa Kashera, because the Mamzer comes from a kosher drop, so to speak, V'zeba Mitipa Psula, whereas the Nasin really is coming from a people outside of Klal Yisrael. Nasin Kodem Lager, and Nasin comes before a convert, because the Nasin was raised with us in holiness. Again, they essentially joined the Jewish people. But the convert, he was not raised together with us in holiness. Ger Kodem LaEved Meshuchar, and a Ger comes before a slave that's freed. Because this one is cursed, meaning the slave. But the Ger is not cursed, and therefore the Ger comes first. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Eimasai bizman shakul and shav. And when is this true? When all other things are equal. So then we say that again, Kohen before Levi, etc. But if the Talmud Chacham, let's say the Mamzer is a Talmud Chacham, and the Kohen Gadol is an Amoritz, then the Mamzer would come first. And the Gemara says, Menohani Mili, from where do we know that this is the case? Am Rav Achab Rav Chanina says, the Amar Krotz, because the Pasuk says, Yikarahi mipninim, it says that the Torah is very precious, and it says mipninim, and we darshan that to mean as follows, Mi Kohen Gadol, shenichnas lefnai v'lefnim, the Torah is Yikar, it's more precious than the Kohen Gadol who enters Lefnai v'Lefnim, he enters the Holy of Holies, and therefore the idea is again, a Mamzer who's a Talmud Chacham who knows Torah, he takes precedence over a Kohen Gadol Am Ha'aretz. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, Bedinu sheyaktem even meshuchar lager. Really, a freed slave should come before a convert. Shezeh gadol imanu b'kedusha, because the even meshuchar was raised with us in holiness. V'zeh lo gadol imanu b'kedusha, and the ger, he was not raised with us in holiness. Elo zeh haya b'chlal oror. However, the even meshuchar is included as oror, as cursed. V'zeh lo haya b'chlal oror. And when it comes to the ger, he's not considered cursed, and therefore the ger comes first. And the Gemara continues, Shalu Talmida ves Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Tzadok. The students asked Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Tzadok, Mipnei ma hakol rotzen lisa giores. How come everybody runs to marry a woman who converts? Ve'ein hakol rotzen lisa mishucheres. But everyone does not necessarily run to marry a slave, a woman who was a slave who was freed. Amar Lemi said to them, Zu haisa bechlal ara, because this one is cursed, meaning the slave. Ve'zu lo haisa bechlal ara, and this one is not cursed. Davar acher, another explanation, Zu haisa becheskas shomer. This one, there's a presumption that she was watched over, meaning she hasn't had any kind of illicit relationships. That's referring to the giores. Ve'zu lo haisa becheskas shomer. But when it comes to the slave that was freed, there's no chazaka, there's no presumption that she was protected, so to speak, in terms of acts of relations, and therefore the people run to marry the giores and not the female slave who was freed. And the Gemara continues, Shalu Talmida ves Rebbe Elazar. The students asked Rebbe Elazar, Mipnei ma hakelev makir eskono, v'chasol eino makir eskono. Why does a dog recognize its owner, but a cat does not recognize its owner? Amar Lemi said to them, Umaha ochel mimasha achbar ochel mishkach. If somebody eats from something which a mouse eats from, so it causes him to forget. So ha'ochel achbor atzmo, one who eats a mouse itself, meaning a cat, eats a mouse, alachas kama v'kama, certainly that will cause it to forget, and that's why the cat does not recognize its owner. Shalu Talmida ves Rebbe Elazar, the students asked Rebbe Elazar, B'vnei ma hakol moshlim b'achbarim, why is it that all of the creatures, they rule over the mice? And the answer is Memnesha Suran Ra, because they have an evil inclination. Maihi, what's that evil inclination? Rava Amar, Rava says, Afilu glimi gaitse, they even chew on cloaks. The idea is even something that provides no nourishment, they will bite on that, they will chew that, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis.